Welcome. Take a breath. You're here now at the Lotus Sleeper. Tonight, we journey together through the complete life of the Buddha, from his birth as a prince to his awakening beneath the Bodhi tree, to his final resting place beneath the salt trees. No rush, no pressure, just gentle wisdom flowing like a river. Let your body relax, your mind open, your heart soften, and we'll begin when you're ready. Before we begin our journey tonight, if you'd like to connect with fellow travelers, leave a comment below telling us, what time is it where you are? Where in the world are you listening from? And how are you feeling in this moment? There's something beautiful about knowing we're all here together, across time zones and continents, finding peace in the same ancient story, the same timeless wisdom that has guided seekers for 2,500 years. Now, let's begin. The air is still. The night is quiet. And in this sacred space between waking and sleep, we can truly hear this ancient story. A story that has been told for millennia, passed from teacher to student, from heart to heart, across generations and oceans. Tonight, we walk beside a man who was born a prince and became the awakened one, a man who left everything to find the truth of existence, a man whose journey mirrors our own longing, our own questions, our own search for peace. Let your shoulders drop, your jaw soften. There's nothing to hold on to here, nothing to figure out. Just the gentle unfolding of a life that changed the world. As your breathing deepens, as your body settles into comfort, into rest, let us begin our journey into the life of Siddhartha Gautama, who became known simply as the Buddha, the awakened one. Close your eyes if you haven't already. Feel yourself sinking deeper into wherever you're resting, and know that you're safe here, held by this ancient story, this timeless wisdom that speaks to something deep within you, something you've always known, even without words. The story begins long ago, in a time when kingdoms rose and fell like waves, when seekers wandered forest paths searching for truth, when the air was thick with spiritual longing, and the world was ready for a teacher who would show a different way, a middle way, a path that leads to freedom. More than 2,500 years ago, in the lush foothills of the Himalayas, in a place we now call Nepal, there was a small kingdom, a territory belonging to the Shakya clan, prosperous and peaceful, ruled by a chief named Suddhodana. Let your breath slow, deeper, slower, as we step back in time. King Suddhodana ruled from his capital at Kapilavastu, a city whose exact location has been debated by scholars, but which existed somewhere in the borderlands between modern India and Nepal, a fertile region where rivers ran clear, where forests grew thick, where life was good for those fortunate enough to live in the palace. The king was married to Queen Maya, a woman of the neighboring Kolya clan, known for her grace, her kindness, her beauty, both inner and outer. And after years of marriage, she became pregnant, carrying within her a child who would change the course of human history. Feel your body sinking deeper. Nothing to do. Nowhere to be. According to the ancient texts, according to the stories passed down through generations, Queen Maya had a dream, a vision of a white elephant, radiant and pure, entering her side. And from this miraculous conception, the child was formed, destined for greatness, destined to awaken. When the time came for the birth, Queen Maya was traveling, following the custom of returning to her family home for the delivery. But the baby would not wait. In a garden in Lumbini, beneath the spreading branches of a sal tree, she grasped the tree for support and, standing, gave birth to her son. The legends tell us the child emerged, fully formed, radiant with an otherworldly light, that he took 7 steps, that lotus flowers bloomed where his feet touched the earth, that he proclaimed this would be his final birth, the end of the cycle of rebirth. Whether these miracles occurred as told, or whether they are beautiful metaphors for the extraordinary nature of this being, we cannot know, and perhaps it doesn't matter. What matters is that a child was born, a child who carried within him the potential for perfect awakening. Let your eyelids grow heavy, your breathing so slow, so steady. They named him Siddhartha, which means he who achieves his aim, or he who attains his goal, a prophetic name, for he would indeed achieve his aim, though not in the way his father hoped. Queen Maya held her newborn son, gazed into his eyes, and felt the profound love that mothers feel. But her joy was brief. For 7 days after the birth, she died, leaving the infant Siddhartha to be raised by her sister, Mahaprajapati, who loved him as her own. The kingdom was called to the palace for the naming ceremony, for the presentation of the prince, and 8 Brahmin priests were summoned, learned men who could read the signs, who could see what was written in the stars. They examined the infant carefully, noting the marks upon his body, the signs of an extraordinary being. And 7 of them proclaimed that this child would become either a great king, a universal monarch who would rule the world, or a great spiritual teacher, an enlightened sage who would guide humanity. But one Brahmin, the youngest, a man named Kaundinya, stood alone in his certainty. This child will become a Buddha, an awakened one. He will not be a king. He will renounce the world. He will find the truth, and he will teach it to others. King Suddhodana heard these prophecies with a father's mixed emotions, pride and fear intertwined, for he wanted his son to inherit the throne, to rule the kingdom, to carry on the family line. The thought of his son becoming a wandering ascetic, leaving the palace, abandoning his royal duties, filled the king with dread. And so, from that day forward, Suddhodana made a decision that would shape young Siddhartha's entire childhood. He would shield his son from all suffering, from all pain, from any sight or experience that might turn his mind toward renunciation, toward spiritual seeking. Young Siddhartha grew up surrounded by beauty, knowing only comfort. The world beyond the palace walls was kept carefully hidden from him. When he walked in the palace gardens, servants would hurry ahead, removing any dead leaves, any wilted flowers, anything that might hint at decay, at impermanence, at the reality of suffering. He was educated by the finest teachers, learned the arts of kingship, studied literature and philosophy, mathematics and music. He was trained in the warrior arts, archery and swordsmanship, wrestling and riding, for a prince must be prepared to defend his kingdom, to lead his people in times of war. And he excelled at everything. His intelligence was keen, his body strong and graceful, his mind quick to learn. He surpassed his teachers, won competitions, became known as a prince of exceptional abilities. As he grew into a young man, his father arranged a marriage, hoping that family ties would bind Siddhartha to the palace, to his royal duties. The bride was Yasodhara, a princess from a noble family, beautiful and accomplished, wise and kind. Let your thoughts drift, your mind rest. The wisdom will find its way in. The marriage was celebrated with great ceremony, and in time, Yasodhara became pregnant and gave birth to a son, whom they named Rahula, which means fetter or bond, for Siddhartha reportedly felt, upon hearing of his son's birth, that this was another chain binding him to worldly life. Yet despite all the pleasure, all the comfort, all the love of family, something stirred within Siddhartha's heart, a restlessness, a sense that something was missing, that life must be more than this endless round of entertainment and pleasure, that beneath the surface of this perfect world, some deeper truth was waiting. He would sit sometimes in the garden, beneath the trees, and fall into deep concentration, and in those moments of stillness, he touched something vast and peaceful, something beyond the world of palace walls and royal duties. The ancient texts tell us of one particular day when Siddhartha was still a child, perhaps 7 years old, when his father took him to observe the plowing festival, a ritual celebration of the agricultural season, and young Siddhartha sat beneath a rose apple tree while festivities continued around him. And there, in the shade of that tree, he entered spontaneously into meditation, into a state of deep absorption, where time disappeared, where the boundaries between self and world dissolved. And when his attendants found him, hours had passed. The sun had moved across the sky, but the shadow of the tree had not moved, had remained fixed, protecting the meditating child. This experience planted a seed, a memory of peace, of natural awareness that would return to him many years later, when he needed it most. Your breathing is so slow now, so deep. Let yourself sink further into rest. For 29 years, Siddhartha lived in the palace, surrounded by luxury, married to a devoted wife, father to a young son, heir to a kingdom. He had everything a person could want. And yet, the human heart knows, somehow, when something essential is missing, when we are living on the surface of life, when we are avoiding the deeper questions. And Siddhartha's heart knew, even if his mind could not yet articulate what was wrong. The palace walls grew higher in his mind, became a beautiful prison. The pleasures that once delighted him began to feel hollow, empty, like eating but never feeling satisfied, like drinking but never quenching the thirst. The change began with curiosity, with a simple request. Siddhartha approached his father and asked permission to leave the palace grounds, to see the city, to know the world beyond the walls that had contained him all his life. King Suddhodana could not refuse without raising suspicion, could not keep his 29-year-old son imprisoned forever. And so he agreed. but he took precautions. He ordered the streets cleaned, the sick hidden away, the elderly kept indoors. Only young and healthy people were to line the route. Only beauty and vitality were to be visible. One last attempt to maintain the illusion. The royal chariot was prepared, and Siddhartha's charioteer, a man named Channa, loyal and true, made ready for the journey into the city, into the world, into reality. Let your jaw soften, your hands unclench. Nothing to hold on to here. The first journey began in joy. Siddhartha saw the city in all its bustling life, the markets full of goods, the people going about their daily business, children playing, merchants calling out their wares, and for a time it seemed the king's plan had worked. Siddhartha saw only what was pleasant, only what was good. But then, despite all precautions, something appeared that could not be hidden. An old man, bent with age, leaning heavily on a staff, skin wrinkled and spotted, hair white as snow, moving slowly, painfully, each step an effort. Siddhartha had never seen old age, had never witnessed what time does to the body. And he turned to Channa with questions. What is wrong with that man? Why does he look that way? Why can he barely walk? And Channa, who was honest, who could not lie to his prince, answered simply, That is an old man. Age has done this to him, and it comes to everyone, to you, to me, to all who live long enough. The body weakens, the strength fades. This is the nature of life. The words struck Siddhartha like a physical blow. Will this happen to me? He asked. Yes, said Channa, if you live long enough, and to everyone you love, everyone in the palace, everyone you've ever known. Age spares no one. The joy of the outing was shattered. Siddhartha returned to the palace, shaken, disturbed. The perfect world his father had created was revealed as temporary, as fragile as morning dew. Your body is completely at rest now, your mind so quiet, drifting deeper, but curiosity had been awakened. Questions had been raised that could not be silenced. And so Siddhartha ventured out again on a second chariot ride. And this time, despite all the king's efforts, he encountered a sick man lying by the roadside, body racked with fever, trembling, groaning in pain, skin covered in sores. Again Siddhartha asked. Again Channa answered. This is sickness, disease, suffering of the body. It can strike anyone, at any time. Even the young, even the strong, even princes in palaces. No one is immune. No one is safe from the possibility of illness. The prince's mind reeled. 2 more trips outside the palace, 2 more encounters with reality, and each one stripped away another layer of the beautiful illusion, revealing the suffering that his father had tried so desperately to hide. On the 3rd journey, Siddhartha encountered something even more disturbing. A funeral procession. A body wrapped in cloth carried on a bier, mourners following behind, wailing, weeping, faces contorted with grief. "What is this?" Siddhartha asked, and Channa explained. "This is death, the end of life. The body ceases to function. Consciousness departs, and what remains is carried to the cremation ground, to be burned to ash, returned to the elements. And this happens to everyone?" "Yes, without exception." "Even me?" "Yes, even you. Even your father, the king. Even your wife and child. Everyone you love will die. Everyone you meet will die. Death is certain. Only the time is uncertain. These 3 sights, old age, sickness, death, are traditionally called the first 3 messengers, the wake-up calls that shatter our complacency, that break through our denial, that force us to confront the fundamental truth of existence, that all conditioned things are subject to change, to decay, to ending. Siddhartha returned to the palace after each journey more disturbed than before. The dancing girls no longer pleased him. The music sounded hollow. The feast foods tasted like ash in his mouth, for he knew now, he understood, that everyone he loved, everything he cherished, including his own body, his own life, was subject to aging, to sickness, to death. He looked at his beautiful wife and saw the old woman she would become. He held his infant son and saw the suffering that awaited him. He gazed at his own reflection and saw the corpse he would become. The impermanence of all things became viscerally real, undeniably present. Sleep began to elude him. He would lie awake at night, questions churning through his mind. What is the meaning of life if it ends in death? What is the point of happiness if it's followed by grief? How can we build anything lasting on such an impermanent foundation? Is there no way out? No escape? No liberation from this cycle of birth and death? But there was a 4th sight, a 4th messenger that would offer hope, would point toward a possibility. On his 4th journey, beyond the palace walls, Siddhartha encountered a wandering ascetic, a sadhu, a holy man, dressed in simple robes, carrying nothing but a single bowl, walking peacefully along the road. And though this man had renounced all worldly possessions, though he owned nothing, slept under trees, ate only what was given, there was something in his face, in his bearing, something that Siddhartha had not seen anywhere in the palace, a quality of peace, of contentment, of freedom. Channa explained, "This is a spiritual seeker, one who has renounced worldly life, who has left behind family and possessions, who wanders seeking truth, seeking liberation from suffering, seeking enlightenment." And something in Siddhartha's heart leaped up. Yes, this is the answer. This is the path. If aging, sickness, and death are inevitable, then the only meaningful pursuit is to find freedom from suffering, to discover what lies beyond this cycle, to awaken to the deepest truth. Let your breath deepen, slow down, release. That night, Siddhartha made his decision. He would leave. He would renounce his princely life, his wife, his child, his kingdom, everything, to search for the truth, to find liberation, not just for himself, but for all beings. For he understood now that everyone suffers, everyone ages, everyone dies, and if there was a way out, a path to freedom, he must find it. He must walk it. He must show it to others. The ancient texts describe his final night in the palace with heartbreaking detail. He went to Yasodhara's chamber, found her sleeping with their infant son, and he stood there in the doorway, gazing at them, knowing he was about to break her heart, to abandon his child, to violate every duty a husband and father holds sacred. He wanted to hold his son one more time, to kiss Yasodhara goodbye. But he feared that if he woke them, if he had to face their tears, their pleas for him to stay, his resolve might falter. And so, in the depth of night, he turned away from all he loved, from all that gave his life worldly meaning, and chose the spiritual path. He summoned Channa, told him to prepare his horse, Kanthaka, his favorite, fastest steed, and together they rode out of the palace, through the sleeping city, toward the edge of the kingdom, toward the forest, toward the unknown. The ancient texts say the gods muffled the horses' hooves, ensured the guards slept, opened the gates silently. For this great renunciation was destined, was necessary. was the beginning of something that would benefit all beings for ages to come. At the edge of the forest, at the boundary between his old life and the new, Siddhartha dismounted, took his sword, and cut off his long hair, the mark of his royal status, and cast aside his fine clothes, his jewels, his princely ornaments. There's nowhere else you need to be, nothing else you need to do. Just rest. He was 29 years old, in the prime of life, and he had given up everything the world considers valuable: wealth, power, family, comfort, security, all of it, abandoned in a single night, for the sake of something that might not even exist. Liberation, enlightenment, freedom from suffering. This moment, this great renunciation, is one of the most significant in the Buddha's life, for it demonstrates the utter sincerity of his seeking, the depth of his commitment. He was not a casual spiritual dabbler, not someone who wanted enlightenment without sacrifice. He was willing to give up everything, risk everything, for the possibility of awakening. And so, alone in the forest, with nothing but his determination and his questions, Siddhartha Gautama began his search, began the journey that would lead him, eventually, to the Bodhi tree, to awakening, to becoming the Buddha, the enlightened one, the teacher of gods and humans, the one who would show the way out of suffering. But that awakening was still 6 years away. 6 years of intense seeking, of trial and error, of practices that pushed him to the very edge of death, before he would finally discover the middle way, the path that leads to liberation. Your mind is so quiet now, thoughts drifting like clouds, body held by comfort. The forests of ancient India were full of spiritual seekers, ascetics and hermits, yogis and philosophers, each pursuing their own path to liberation, some through meditation, some through austerities, some through study and contemplation. And into this world of seekers, Siddhartha entered, unknown, unrecognized, just another wanderer in ochre robes. His first teacher was a renowned sage named Alara Kalama, a master of meditation, who taught a system leading to deep states of absorption, of consciousness refined beyond thought, beyond ordinary awareness, to a realm called the sphere of nothingness, where even the sense of self begins to dissolve. Siddhartha proved to be an extraordinary student, what took others years to master. He mastered in weeks. He entered into the deep meditations, experienced the refined states of consciousness, achieved everything his teacher could teach him. And Alara Kalama was impressed, amazed. He offered to share his leadership, to make Siddhartha his equal, his partner in teaching. But Siddhartha declined, for he recognized that while these meditative states were profound, were valuable, were extraordinary experiences, they were not liberation. For when the meditation ended, when consciousness returned to ordinary awareness, the suffering remained. Aging, sickness, death were still there, waiting. These states were temporary refuges, not permanent freedom. And so he thanked his teacher, honored what he had learned, and moved on, seeking something deeper, something that would truly end suffering, not just temporarily suppress it. Let your shoulders drop, your body sinking deeper into rest. His second teacher was another meditation master, Uddaka Ramaputta, who had developed his practice even further, who could enter an even more refined state, called neither perception nor non-perception, a state so subtle that ordinary consciousness could barely comprehend it, where awareness hovered at the very edge of existence itself. Again, Siddhartha excelled. Again, he mastered what was taught. Again, he achieved the highest states his teacher could demonstrate. And again, the teacher offered partnership, recognition, a position of honor. And again, Siddhartha declined, for he saw clearly that even this exquisitely refined state of consciousness was not the answer, for it too was temporary, conditioned, dependent on specific practices and circumstances. When the meditation ended, suffering returned. The fundamental problem remained unsolved. So Siddhartha struck out on his own, determined to find the answer himself, to push beyond what had been taught, to discover what no one before him had found. Your breathing is so slow, so steady, peaceful, calm. He encountered 5 other ascetics, wanderers like himself, seekers pursuing liberation through a different method, through austerities, through self-mortification, through punishing the body into submission. For the prevailing belief was that the body was the enemy, that physical desires and needs were obstacles to spiritual realization, that by conquering the body, by reducing its needs to almost nothing, consciousness could break free, could achieve liberation. This practice, this approach, was common among serious seekers of that time. They believed that enlightenment required complete detachment from bodily existence, that you had to essentially die while living, reduce yourself to almost nothing, before truth would reveal itself. Siddhartha joined these 5 ascetics, and together they practiced severe austerities in the forests near a village called Uruvela, near the river now known as the Niranjana, in the region of Magadha, in what is now Bihar in India. And he threw himself into these practices with the same intensity, the same determination, the same unwavering commitment he had brought to everything else. If liberation required suffering, then he would suffer. If it required sacrifice, he would sacrifice. Nothing would hold him back. He fasted, restricting his food to a single grain of rice per day, then to nothing at all for days on end. His body grew thin, skeletal. His ribs showed clearly through his skin. His backbone could be felt through his belly. His limbs became stick-thin, fragile, barely able to support him. He practiced breath control, holding his breath until his head pounded, until his body convulsed, until consciousness nearly fled, pushing the limits of what a human body can endure. He slept on beds of thorns, sat in the scorching sun at midday, stood for hours without moving, refused shelter during the monsoon rains, exposed himself to every discomfort, every physical hardship he could devise. Let your body rest, your mind quiet, floating on these words. The 5 ascetics who practiced with him watched in awe. Here was someone who surpassed them all, who took self-mortification to extremes they had never dared. Siddhartha became known among the spiritual seekers of that region, became recognized as an ascetic of extraordinary dedication, of fearsome discipline. But despite all this suffering, despite pushing his body to the very edge of death, despite 6 years of the most severe austerities, enlightenment did not come. Liberation remained elusive. Suffering continued. The fundamental questions remained unanswered. His body was wasting away. One day, when he tried to stand, he fainted, collapsed to the ground, barely conscious, hovering between life and death. And in that moment of crisis, a memory arose, a memory from childhood, of sitting beneath the rose apple tree, of entering spontaneously into meditation, into a state of natural ease and clarity. And he had not achieved that state through suffering, through self-torture, but through simple presence, through letting go. And suddenly he understood. He saw clearly that these austerities were just another extreme, just the opposite side of the same coin. In palace, he had indulged every desire. Now he was denying every need. But both approaches missed something essential. Both were forms of violence against the natural state. Both were obstacles rather than aids to awakening. The middle way, the path he had been seeking, lay between these extremes, between indulgence and denial, between luxury and poverty, between pleasure and pain. It was a path of balance, of wisdom, of working with the body rather than against it. Your eyelids are so heavy, your body so relaxed, drifting, floating. But first, he had to recover, to restore his body, to rebuild his strength. For enlightenment cannot be achieved in a body on the verge of death. Consciousness needs a functioning vehicle. Awareness needs a healthy base. The body is not the enemy. It is the temple, the vehicle, the necessary foundation for practice. A young woman appeared, a village girl named Sujata, who had been making offerings at a nearby shrine, and she saw this skeleton of a man, this ascetic who looked like a living corpse, and compassion arose in her heart. She offered him food, a bowl of rice cooked in milk, rich and nourishing. And Siddhartha, recognizing that his survival depended on accepting, took the offering and ate, and felt strength returning to his depleted body, felt life flowing back into his exhausted frame. The 5 ascetics who had been his companions saw this, saw their hero eating, breaking his fast, abandoning the ascetic practices, and they were disgusted, disappointed. They believed he had given up, had weakened, had failed in his spiritual quest. And so they left him, walked away, went to continue their practices elsewhere, near Sarnath, near the city of Varanasi, where they would later become his first disciples. But for now, they abandoned him, and Siddhartha was alone, truly alone, rejected by his family when he left the palace, rejected by his spiritual companions when he changed practice, with nothing but his determination, his questions, his unwavering commitment to finding the truth, no matter what it cost, no matter how long it took. He spent days regaining his strength, eating regular meals, allowing his body to heal, and as physical health returned, as his energy rebuilt, a new clarity emerged, a confidence that he was on the right track, that the middle way was indeed the path, and that he was ready now, ready to sit, ready to go all the way, ready to achieve liberation or die trying. There's no need to remember all of this. Let it wash over you like gentle rain. He left the forest where he had practiced, walked along the Niranjana river, to a place now called Bodh Gaya, where a great tree stood, a peepal tree with spreading branches and deep roots, and something in him recognized this place, knew this was where it would happen, where awakening would come, or where he would die in the attempt. He gathered grass from a nearby field, made a seat beneath the tree, positioned himself facing east, and made a vow, a solemn commitment. I will not rise from this spot until I have attained complete enlightenment, until I have found the answer, until I have achieved liberation, even if my body withers away, even if only skin and bones remain. I will not move until enlightenment is won. This determination, this absolute commitment, is sometimes called the Bodhisattva's resolve, the unwavering dedication that makes awakening possible. For enlightenment cannot be forced, but it requires complete sincerity, total dedication, the willingness to stake everything on truth. And so, having abandoned both extremes, having found the middle way, having restored his body and strengthened his resolve, Siddhartha sat beneath the Bodhi tree, sat in meditation, and prepared for the longest night of his life, the night that would end in awakening or in death, the night that would change everything. Your body is completely at peace, your mind so quiet now, held by this ancient story. The evening sun touched the horizon, casting long shadows across the grass. A light breeze stirred the leaves of the Bodhi tree, and Siddhartha sat, perfectly still, eyes half closed, attention turned inward, beginning the meditation that would carry him to liberation, or to his end. The ancient texts describe this night in language both literal and symbolic, filled with images that can be understood on many levels. And scholars note that what we call the Mara story appears primarily in poetic verses of the Pali canon. This suggests that the Mara encounter can be understood in at least two ways: as an external spiritual trial, or as a poetic representation of the internal struggles, the fears, the desires, the doubts that arise when consciousness approaches liberation. Both interpretations have ancient roots in Buddhist tradition. Both offer wisdom. As darkness fell, as the world around him grew still, Siddhartha entered deep meditation, his mind clear and focused, his body relaxed yet alert, his awareness expanding, opening, touching dimensions of consciousness he had never before accessed. The texts tell us that Mara appeared. Mara, a figure who can be understood as the personification of delusion, of death and desire, or as the internal obstacles that keep beings trapped in suffering. And Mara saw what was happening, saw that this seeker was on the verge of liberation. And so Mara attacked. According to the traditional accounts, first came the army of fear, terrifying visions, demons and monsters, weapons and flames, whether these were external forces or internal manifestations of terror. The teaching remains clear. Siddhartha remained unmoved, for he had seen through fear, had recognized it as empty of ultimate reality, and the weapons turned to flowers as they approached him, falling harmlessly to the ground. Let your breath deepen, slow down, release. Then Mara sent his daughters, in the traditional telling, 3 beings personifying desire and pleasure, beautiful beyond description, seductive, promising everything the senses could want. The names given to them vary in different sources. Some texts call them tanha, arati, and raga, craving, discontent, and passion, trying to pull Siddhartha back into the world of desire, back into the cycle. But Siddhartha saw them clearly, saw them as illusions, as constructions of mind, and they lost their power. Their allure faded before his clear seeing. Finally, Mara challenged Siddhartha's right to sit in that spot, to seek enlightenment. Who are you to claim this place? Mara demanded. Who witnesses your right to liberation? Show me your proof, your authority, your worthiness. And Siddhartha reached down, touched the earth with his right hand, and the earth itself responded, I witness. The ground itself bore testimony to his countless lifetimes of practice, his accumulated merit, his preparation for this moment. Mara had no reply, no argument against the testimony of the earth itself. And so the tempter departed, defeated, leaving Siddhartha to continue his meditation undisturbed. This touching of the earth, this earth witness mudra, became one of the most iconic images in Buddhist art. The Buddha seated, right hand touching the ground, calling on the earth to witness his enlightenment, symbolizing his connection to reality, his groundedness in truth. Your body is sinking deeper, your mind so quiet, floating on these ancient words. The night progressed, and Siddhartha's meditation deepened, consciousness moving through layers, through levels of awareness, peeling back the veils of illusion, seeing more and more clearly into the nature of reality. In the first watch of the night, roughly from evening until midnight, he gained knowledge of his past lives. Memories arose, one lifetime after another. Hundreds, thousands, countless births extending back through time. He saw himself as a king, as a beggar, as an animal, as a god, experiencing the whole spectrum of existence, seeing the patterns, the karmic threads connecting one life to the next. This was not mere memory, but direct perception of the mechanism of rebirth, how actions create consequences, how consequences shape future conditions, how beings move through the cycles of existence, propelled by ignorance and craving, dying and being reborn over and over, in a process without beginning, without end, unless liberation is achieved. In the second watch, from midnight until dawn approached, he developed what the texts call the divine eye, the ability to see how beings everywhere die and are reborn, how their actions shape their destinies, how those who act with wisdom and compassion move toward fortunate rebirths, while those who act with ignorance and cruelty experience suffering. He saw the operation of karma, cause and effect, playing out across countless lives in countless realms. Let your shoulders drop, your jaw soften. There's nothing to hold on to here. Then came the third watch, the hours just before dawn, when the darkest part of night gives way to the first hints of light. And in those hours, Siddhartha penetrated to the very root of suffering, saw clearly the chain of causation that binds beings to the cycle of birth and death. He saw how ignorance gives rise to karmic formations, how karmic formations give rise to consciousness, how consciousness gives rise to name and form, how name and form give rise to the 6 sense bases, how the senses give rise to contact, how contact gives rise to feeling, how feeling gives rise to craving, how craving gives rise to clinging, how clinging gives rise to becoming, how becoming gives rise to birth, and how birth gives rise to aging and death, to sorrow and lamentation, to pain and grief, to the whole mass of suffering. This is dependent origination, one of the Buddha's most profound teachings, the 12 links that chain beings to suffering. And he saw each link clearly, understood how each arises from the preceding, how the whole structure depends on ignorance, on not seeing things as they truly are. And then, crucially, he saw the cessation, saw how when ignorance ceases, karmic formations cease. When karmic formations cease, consciousness ceases to be bound, and on through the chain, each link falling away, until birth ceases. And with the cessation of birth, aging and death cease, suffering ceases, freedom is achieved, liberation is complete. This understanding crystallized into what would become known as the Four Noble Truths, the foundation of all Buddhist teaching, simple yet profound, obvious yet revolutionary, your eyelids growing heavy, your breathing so slow, so steady. The first noble truth: suffering exists. This is undeniable. Birth is suffering. Aging is suffering. Sickness is suffering. Death is suffering. Being separated from what we love is suffering. Being joined to what we dislike is suffering. Not getting what we want is suffering. In short, the 5 aggregates of clinging are suffering. The very structure of the conditioned existence involves unsatisfactoriness, involves dukkha. The second noble truth: suffering has a cause, and that cause is craving, thirst, tanha, the constant wanting, the endless grasping, the desire for pleasure, for existence, for non-existence. This craving is like a fire that consumes everything, that can never be satisfied, that perpetuates the cycle of becoming, of birth and death and rebirth. The third noble truth: suffering can cease. Liberation is possible. Nirvana is real. There is an end to the cycle, an escape from the wheel, a shore beyond the ocean of samsara. This cessation comes when craving ceases, when the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion are extinguished, when ignorance is replaced by wisdom, when grasping gives way to letting go. The fourth noble truth: there is a path that leads to the cessation of suffering, the noble eightfold path: right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, a practical training, a way of life that gradually purifies the mind, develops wisdom, leads step by step to liberation. These truths are not commandments, not beliefs to be accepted on faith, but observations to be verified, insights to be realized. The Buddha would later say, "Come and see. Test these teachings for yourself. Practice and discover if they are true. Don't believe me. Know for yourself. Feel your body completely at rest, your mind so quiet now. As the dawn approached, as the morning star appeared in the eastern sky, the final breakthrough occurred. All the accumulated insight, all the understanding, crystallized into direct realization, into awakening, into enlightenment. The Buddha sat in the afterglow of enlightenment, experiencing the peace of liberation, the freedom beyond all conditioned states. Nirvana realized, awakening within the body, and according to later Mahayana sutras, he is reported to have exclaimed, "Wonder of wonders! This very enlightenment is the nature of all beings, and yet they are unhappy for lack of it." This statement, though not found in the earliest Pali sources, would become central to Mahayana Buddhism's understanding that Buddha nature, the potential for awakening, exists in all beings, that enlightenment is not something foreign to be acquired, but our deepest nature to be uncovered. This teaching offers profound hope. Though we should note, it develops more fully in later Buddhist traditions. Let your thoughts drift, your body rest, the wisdom will find its way in. For 7 weeks, the Buddha remained near the Bodhi tree, moving from place to place in the vicinity, experiencing the bliss of liberation, contemplating what he had discovered, considering what to do next, for he had achieved his goal, had found what he sought. He could have simply remained in the peace of nirvana, not bothering to teach. The texts say he initially hesitated to teach, for what he had discovered was profound, subtle, difficult to see, going against the stream of ordinary thinking. The Arya Pariyasana Sutta records his thought. This Dhamma I have attained is deep, hard to see, hard to understand, peaceful and sublime, not within the sphere of reasoning, subtle, to be experienced by the wise, yet beings delight in attachment, are excited by attachment, enjoy attachment. It's hard for such beings to see this truth. But then, the tradition tells us, Brahma Sahampati, a great deity in the Buddhist cosmological framework, appeared and petitioned the Buddha to teach. There are beings, Brahma said, with little dust in their eyes, who are falling away because they do not hear the Dhamma. These beings will understand. Please, for the sake of those with little dust in their eyes, teach the Dhamma, show the path. This petition is recounted in multiple canonical sources, including the Aryapariyesana Sutta. Whether this conversation represents a literal encounter with a deity, or whether it symbolizes the Buddha's own compassion arising, or his recognition that despite the difficulty, teaching was necessary. Buddhist traditions have understood it variously. What matters is the result. The Buddha decided to teach, to share what he had discovered, to turn the wheel of Dhamma, to offer the path to others. But who to teach first? His thoughts turned to his former teachers, Alara Kalama and Uddaka Ramaputta. They would understand. They had developed their practice far. They would be able to grasp these teachings. But when he directed his awareness toward them, he saw that both had recently died, had passed away just days before. The opportunity to teach them was lost. Then he thought of the 5 ascetics, his former companions, the ones who had left him when he abandoned extreme austerities. They were sincere seekers, dedicated practitioners. They would understand, and he knew where to find them. They had gone to the deer park near Varanasi, to Isipatana, the place now called Sarnath. And so the Buddha set out on foot, walking from Bodh Gaya toward Varanasi, a journey of several days, walking alone, a newly awakened Buddha, carrying within him a teaching that would transform the world, about to deliver his first sermon, to set in motion a tradition that would spread across Asia and eventually around the globe. Your body is so relaxed now, floating, drifting, held by these ancient words. On the way, he met another wandering ascetic, a man named Upaka, who was struck by the Buddha's appearance, his radiant presence, his peaceful countenance. And Upaka asked, "Who is your teacher? Under whom have you gone forth? Whose doctrine do you profess?" And the Buddha replied, "I have no teacher. There is no one like me. In the world with its gods, I have no counterpart. I am the perfected one in the world. I am the unsurpassed teacher. I alone am fully enlightened. I have attained peace. I have reached nirvana." Upaka's response was telling. "Really, friend?" he said, with a tone of skepticism. And then, "Maybe so." And he took a different path, went his own way, unable to recognize the awakened one standing before him. This would happen many times. The Buddha would meet people who couldn't see, couldn't recognize what he had become, who dismissed his claims as pretension. But the 5 ascetics would see, would understand, for their eyes had little dust. Their practice had prepared them, and to them, the Buddha would deliver his first teaching, would turn the wheel of Dhamma for the first time. The Buddha walked steadily toward Sarnath, toward the deer park on the outskirts of Varanasi, where his former companions practiced their austerities, where the first seeds of the Sangha, the community of practitioners, would be planted, where the teaching would begin to spread. When the 5 ascetics saw him approaching from a distance, they made a pact among themselves. Here comes that ascetic Gautama, who gave up the practice, who turned to a life of abundance. Let us not pay respect to him, not rise to greet him, not take his bowl and robe, but we can set out a seat for him if he wishes to sit. They had planned to ignore him, to show their disappointment, their disapproval. But as the Buddha drew nearer, something happened. They couldn't maintain their resolve. Despite their agreement, they found themselves standing, greeting him with respect, offering water, preparing a seat, drawn by something in his presence they couldn't quite name, couldn't quite resist. Let your breath slow, deeper, slower. There's nothing to hold on to here. They still addressed him familiarly, calling him Friend Gautama, and the Buddha gently corrected them. Do not address the Tathagata by name and as friend. The Tathagata is the perfected one, fully enlightened. Give ear. The deathless has been attained. I shall instruct you. I shall teach you the Dhamma, Tathagata, one of the titles the Buddha used for himself, meaning thus gone or thus come, one who has arrived at truth, one who speaks only suchness, only reality as it is. The ascetics were skeptical. Friend Gautama, they said, by that practice, by that conduct, by that performance of austerities, you did not achieve superhuman states or distinction in knowledge and vision. Now that you live abundantly, having given up the practice, how can you have achieved superhuman states? A second time, a third time. The Buddha assured them, the Tathagata is fully enlightened. Listen to the teaching. But they remained doubtful. And finally, the Buddha asked them, have you ever known me to speak like this before? And they had to admit, no, never. And something in his certainty, something in his presence, convinced them to listen, to give him a chance, to hear what he had to say. And so, on the full moon day of the month of Asalha, in the season of the monsoon, the Buddha gave his first teaching. The sermon known in Pali as the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the discourse on setting in motion the wheel of Dhamma. This first teaching that would guide millions toward liberation, preserved in multiple versions across different Buddhist canons. Your body is sinking deeper, your mind so quiet, floating on these words. He began with the middle way, explaining his realization that liberation is found neither in sensual indulgence nor in self-mortification. Neither extreme leads to awakening. One leads to attachment, the other to exhaustion. The middle way, the path of balance, leads to peace, to knowledge, to enlightenment, to nirvana. Then he taught the Four Noble Truths, explained suffering, its cause, its cessation, and the path, going through each truth 3 times, first explaining it, then saying it should be understood, then declaring he had fully understood it. 12 turnings of the wheel, 12 ways of expressing these fundamental insights. As the Buddha taught, one of the 5 ascetics, Kondanya, the youngest, the one who, according to tradition, had predicted at Siddhartha's birth that he would become a Buddha, suddenly understood, penetrated to the truth. The Buddha saw this, saw that his teaching had taken root, that liberation was possible for others, not just for himself, and he exclaimed with joy, "Kondanya knows, Kondanya understands." And from that moment, Kondanya was known as Anya Kondanya. Kondanya who knows. Over the following days, the Buddha continued teaching the 5 ascetics, giving individual instruction, answering questions, clarifying doubts, and one by one, each achieved stream entry. Each entered the path that leads irreversibly to liberation, and they asked to be ordained, to become his disciples. And the Buddha accepted them with the simple formula, "Come, bhikkhu, the Dhamma is well proclaimed. Live the holy life for the complete ending of suffering." And so the Sangha was born, the community of practitioners, the third of the 3 jewels, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, teacher, teaching, community, all now present in the world. The foundation established for what would become one of the world's great spiritual traditions. Let your jaw soften, your hands unclench. Nothing to hold on to here. From Sarnath. The teaching began to spread. The Buddha sent forth his newly awakened disciples. Go forth for the welfare of the many, for happiness of the many, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit of gods and humans. Teach the Dhamma, beautiful in the beginning, beautiful in the middle, beautiful in the end. And they went, these first disciples, and returned with others, seekers who had heard the teaching, who wanted to learn, who wished to practice. And the Sangha grew from 5 to 10 to 20 to 50, spreading outward like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. The Buddha himself traveled through the kingdoms of northern India, teaching whoever would listen, from kings to peasants, from Brahmins to outcasts. He made no distinction. taught that liberation was possible for anyone, regardless of birth, regardless of caste, regardless of gender or status. For enlightenment has nothing to do with social position, everything to do with understanding and practice. Among his early disciples was a wealthy young man named Yasa, son of a treasurer, who had grown disillusioned with sensual pleasures, who heard the Buddha teaching in the early morning, who understood immediately, who became one of the first lay disciples, and whose parents became the first lay followers, the first to take refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Yasa's friends, young men from prominent families, also came to hear the Buddha, and they too were awakened. They too ordained, and the Sangha grew, word spreading from town to town, from village to village. Have you heard? There is an awakened one teaching. There is a path to liberation. Come and see. Your eyelids growing heavy, your breathing so slow, so steady. The Buddha returned to his home kingdom, to Kapilavastu, where his father still ruled, where his wife and son still lived, and the reunion was complex, filled with emotion, with joy and pain intermingled. For though he had found what he sought, though he had achieved liberation and was offering it to others, he had also caused great suffering by his departure, by abandoning his family, his duties. King Suddhodana heard his son teach, and though he struggled to fully understand, though his heart ached with what might have been, he recognized that Siddhartha had indeed found something extraordinary, had become something beyond an ordinary king, beyond even a great emperor. He had become a teacher of liberation, a guide to freedom. Yasodhara saw her former husband, the man who had left her sleeping with their infant son, and her feelings were complicated: anger, hurt, longing, and yet also understanding. For she too had suffered, had sought meaning, and in the Buddha's teaching she found answers, found a path. Eventually, she would ordain, would become one of the first Buddhist nuns, would achieve her own awakening. Many members of the Shakya clan ordained, including Ananda, the Buddha's cousin, who would become his personal attendant, his closest disciple, the one who would remember all the teachings, whose extraordinary memory would preserve the Buddha's words for future generations. Ananda, who would serve the Buddha faithfully for 25 years, attending to his needs, arranging his schedule, protecting his time, and absorbing every word of teaching. Let your body rest. your mind quiet, floating on these ancient words. The Sangha included people from all backgrounds. There was Upali, a barber by caste, considered low-born, who became one of the foremost experts in monastic discipline. There was Maudgalyayana and Shariputra, who had been followers of another teacher, who heard the Dhamma and immediately understood, who became the Buddha's chief disciples, his right and left hands. There was Mahakashyapa, an ascetic of fierce dedication, who would later become the leader of the Sangha after the Buddha's death, who would convene the first Buddhist council to preserve the teachings. There was Angulimala, a bandit and murderer, who had killed 99 people, who wore their fingers on a necklace around his neck, who was transformed by an encounter with the Buddha, who ordained and achieved enlightenment, showing that no one is beyond redemption, no past so dark that it cannot be overcome through practice. The Buddha also established the order of nuns, the Bhikkhuni Sangha, though only after being asked 3 times by his aunt and foster mother, Mahaprajapati, who had raised him after his mother's death. The texts suggest the Buddha initially hesitated, concerned about the challenges women would face in that patriarchal society, but ultimately agreed, recognizing that women are equally capable of enlightenment, equally worthy of ordination. And Mahaprajapati became the first Buddhist nun, followed by many others, including Yasodhara. Among the nuns were extraordinary practitioners. Khema, renowned for her wisdom, Upalavana, known for her psychic powers, Patakara, who achieved enlightenment after terrible tragedy, Kisagotami, who learned about impermanence through the death of her child, each with their own story, their own path to awakening. Your body completely at rest, your mind so quiet now. For 45 years after his enlightenment, the Buddha taught, walking from place to place, teaching whoever would listen, establishing monasteries, training disciples, responding to questions, giving guidance, living simply, possessing only his robes and bowl, sleeping under trees or in caves or in donated shelters, eating once a day, whatever was offered, living the homeless life he had chosen all those years ago when he left the palace. His teaching method was flexible, adapted to the listener. For someone intellectually inclined, he might teach dependent origination, the complex chain of causation. For someone emotionally inclined, he might teach loving kindness, compassion. For someone struggling with desire, he might teach on impermanence, on the unattractive aspects of the body. For someone caught in anger, he might teach on patience, on forgiveness. He taught kings and beggars the same truths, but in language each could understand, in ways each could practice. He was like a doctor, diagnosing the illness, prescribing the appropriate medicine, not giving everyone the same treatment, but tailoring the path to the individual. The teachings were organized into different categories. There were the suttas, the discourses. Where the Buddha explained the Dhamma, there was the Vinaya, the monastic discipline, the rules and guidelines for community life. There were the verses, the poetry, the memorable sayings that disciples could easily recall and repeat. Let your breath deepen, slow down, release. He taught in the deer park, in mango groves, in bamboo forests, in royal palaces, in simple villages, by riverbanks, in mountain caves, wherever people gathered to hear, wherever seekers sought. The Buddha was there, teaching the Dhamma, showing the path. He had debates with other spiritual teachers, dialogues with philosophers, conversations with skeptics, always patient, always clear, never defensive, never aggressive, simply presenting the truth as he saw it, inviting others to test it for themselves, to practice and see. Some accepted his teaching completely, became disciples, ordained, dedicated their lives to the path. Others took what was useful, practiced as lay followers, maintained their ordinary lives while incorporating the Dhamma. Still others rejected his teaching, went their own way, and the Buddha accepted all responses equally, without grasping, without aversion. For he understood that beings ripen at different rates, that seeds planted today might sprout years later, that forcing awakening is impossible. It must arise naturally when conditions are right. The Sangha grew to thousands. Monasteries were established. Wealthy patrons donated land, buildings, resources. Kings sought the Buddha's counsel. Merchants supported the monks and nuns. Farmers offered food. The teaching spread from the Ganges Valley across northern India into surrounding regions, taking root, adapting to new cultures, new languages, beginning the journey that would eventually carry it to Sri Lanka, to Burma, to Thailand, to China, to Tibet, to Japan, to Korea, across Asia, and eventually around the world. Feel yourself floating, drifting, held by comfort, by safety. But the Buddha never lost his simplicity, never became attached to success, to the size of the Sangha, to the fame and respect that came to him. He remained focused on the essential, on teaching liberation, on guiding beings toward awakening, on establishing a community that would preserve and transmit the Dhamma after he was gone. He dealt with conflicts within the Sangha, with personality clashes, with misunderstandings of the teaching, with people who ordained for the wrong reasons, with those who couldn't follow the discipline, always with patience, with wisdom, with skillful means. He watched disciples achieve awakening, saw them transform from confused seekers to clear-eyed practitioners, from suffering beings to liberated ones. And this brought him joy, not pride, not self-satisfaction, but the joy of seeing others find freedom, of watching the Dhamma work its transformation, of knowing the path was true, was effective, was leading beings to the cessation of suffering. He saw others struggle, saw some give up, saw some ordain and disrobe, saw some practice for years without apparent progress, and he encouraged them, taught them patience, reminded them that awakening has its own timing, cannot be forced, that practice itself is valuable, that living ethically, meditating regularly, studying the Dhamma, these are worthy pursuits, even if enlightenment seems far away. And through it all, through decades of teaching, of traveling, of meeting countless beings, of establishing a tradition that would outlast him by millennia, the Buddha remained present, remained awake, remained free, living what he taught, embodying the Dhamma, showing by example what liberation looks like in human form. Your breathing is so slow, so steady, peaceful, calm. The years passed. The Buddha grew older. His body aged like all bodies. His hair turned white. His strength diminished. He developed back problems, digestive issues, the normal ailments of an aging body. But his mind remained clear, his awareness undimmed, his compassion undiminished. For enlightenment is not about the body, it's about the mind, about seeing clearly, about freedom from suffering. And that freedom the Buddha maintained until his very last breath. The Buddha reached his 80th year, an advanced age for his time, when most men would have long since passed from the world. But he had maintained his health through simple living, through regular practice, through balance in all things, the middle way applied to daily life, to food and rest, to activity and meditation, to engagement and solitude. He was staying in Rajagriha, the capital of Magadha, when King Ajatashatru sent a minister to ask his advice, for the king was planning to make war on the Vajika League, a confederation of neighboring states, and wanted to know if the Buddha thought he would succeed. The Buddha's response was indirect. He spoke of 7 conditions that lead to prosperity and protection from decline: holding regular assemblies, meeting in harmony, respecting traditions, honoring elders, protecting women and children, maintaining spiritual practices, supporting holy persons. As long as the Vajikas maintain these conditions, he said, they cannot be defeated. Only if they abandon these principles will they fall. The minister understood, reported back to the king, and the Buddha then turned to Ananda and the monks assembled there, and taught them the same 7 principles, applying them to the Sangha, to the monastic community, showing that these principles of harmony, of respect, of regular practice apply equally to spiritual communities, to nations, to any group seeking to endure and flourish. Let your shoulders drop, your body sinking deeper into rest. This teaching was prophetic, for the Buddha was concerned about what would happen after his death. Would the Sangha hold together? Would the teaching be preserved? Would the community continue to practice and transmit the Dhamma? Or would it fracture, decline, disappear like so many other spiritual movements had? He did what he could to establish a strong foundation, to train his disciples thoroughly, to ensure the teaching was clearly preserved, to establish guidelines and principles that would protect the Sangha. But ultimately, he could not control what would happen after he was gone. He could only plant the seeds, create the conditions, and trust that the Dhamma would survive because it was true, because it worked, because it met a genuine human need. From Rajagriha, the Buddha set out on what would be his final journey, accompanied by Ananda and several other monks, walking north toward the city of Kushinagar, making stops along the way to teach, to rest, to accept offerings of food and shelter. They stopped at Nalanda, at Pataligrama, where a new city was being built, at Vesali, where the Buddha was offered a meal by a courtesan named Ambapali, who gave her mango grove to the Sangha, each place holding memories, connections, teachings given, disciples trained, a life of wandering and teaching now drawing toward its close. At Vesali, the Buddha became seriously ill, experiencing severe pain, likely from the chronic digestive issues that had troubled him in recent years, and he thought he might die there. But through force of will, through deep meditation, he suppressed the illness, recovered enough to continue, for he wanted to reach Kushinagar, wanted to die in a specific place, to complete the journey properly. He called Ananda to him and said something cryptic, something that Ananda would later regret not understanding. He spoke of the possibility of a Buddha living for a full world age if requested, of transcending the normal limits of a human lifespan. And he repeated this hint 3 times. But Ananda, overcome with emotion at his master's illness, didn't understand, didn't make the request. Your eyelids are so heavy, your body so relaxed, drifting, floating. Then Mara appeared, or perhaps it was simply the Buddha's own sense of completion, of mission accomplished. And Mara said, "Let the Blessed One now attain final nirvana. Let him pass away, for his work is complete. His disciples are trained, his teaching established. Nothing more remains to be done." And the Buddha agreed. "In 3 months, I will pass away. In 3 months, the Tathagata will achieve parinirvana, the final release, the complete and total nirvana that comes with the death of an enlightened being." This teaching on impermanence, on letting go, on accepting death, was one of the Buddha's final lessons, showing by example how to face mortality with wisdom rather than fear, with acceptance rather than denial. They continued their journey, and at a village called Pava, they were invited to a meal by a blacksmith named Kunda, a simple man, a sincere devotee, who prepared a special dish for the Buddha. The texts call it Sukaramadava, which could mean pork, or certain types of mushrooms, or truffles that pigs like to eat. The exact translation is uncertain and debated. The precise contents of the Buddha's final meal are uncertain, due to variant textual traditions and ambiguity in translation. The Pali term is Sukaramadava, which some interpret as pork, others as a type of mushroom or truffle that pigs enjoy. Different Buddhist traditions have understood this differently, reflecting varying views on monastics and meat. What the texts agree on is that shortly after this meal, the Buddha became gravely ill, suffering from dysentery, severe abdominal pain, the kind that would fell most people. There's no need to remember all of this. Let it wash over you like gentle rain. He told Ananda specifically, "Do not blame Kunda." The traditional accounts emphasize this strongly. Kunda has gained great merit by offering this final alms. This food is not the cause of my death. My time has simply come. Do not let him feel guilt or remorse. This compassion, this concern for others, even in his own suffering, exemplifies the Buddha's teaching lived out. For even dying, even in terrible pain, he thought of protecting another from unnecessary anguish. They walked on, though the Buddha needed frequent rest, stopping often, the pain intense but borne with grace, until they reached the Kakutha River, and the Buddha asked Ananda to spread his outer robe so he could lie down. So exhausted was he, so weakened by the illness. But after drinking from the river, after resting briefly, he insisted on continuing. They must reach Kushinagar, must complete this final journey. And so they walked, slowly, stopping often. The Buddha, supported by Ananda, making their way toward their destination. Along the way, they encountered a wanderer named Pukusa, who recognized the Buddha, who had heard him teach years before, and Pukusa offered the Buddha a pair of golden-colored robes, beautiful garments, and when they were placed on the Buddha's body, Ananda noticed that the Buddha's skin appeared even more radiant than the golden cloth, glowing with an inner light. And the Buddha explained, there are two occasions when the Tathagata's skin becomes exceedingly clear and bright: the night of full enlightenment and the night of final nirvana. Tonight I will pass away. Tonight the light shines bright one final time. Your body is sinking deeper. Your mind so quiet, floating on these words. They reached Kushinagar finally, a small town, not one of the great cities where the Buddha had taught, but a humble place. And they came to a grove of sal trees, twin trees standing close together. And the Buddha said to Ananda, "Prepare a couch for me here, between these twin sal trees, with my head to the north. For I am weary, I am tired, I wish to lie down." Ananda prepared the resting place, spreading cloth between the trees, arranging it carefully. And the Buddha lay down on his right side, in the lion's posture, one foot resting on the other, his head supported by his right hand, facing west, positioned as he wished to be for his final hours. And immediately, though it was not their season, the sal trees burst into bloom, covered themselves with flowers, and petals began to fall, drifting down like snow, covering the Buddha's body. The traditional accounts speak of celestial music filling the air, of divine beings gathering, of the earth honoring this moment. Let your breath slow, deeper, slower. There's nothing to hold on to here. Ananda was overcome with grief. He left the grove, went to lean against a doorpost and weep. His beloved teacher, his master, his cousin, the one he had served for 25 years, was dying, leaving the world, and Ananda felt lost, bereft. How would he continue without the Buddha's guidance? But the Buddha noticed his absence, sent a monk to fetch him, and when Ananda returned, eyes red from crying, the Buddha spoke to him with such tenderness, such compassion. Ananda, dear Ananda, you have served me faithfully, with body, speech, and mind, with loving kindness that never wavered. You have done well. Continue to practice, and you too will soon be free from all defilements. You too will achieve liberation. These words comforted Ananda, gave him strength, reminded him that the path continues, that the Buddha's physical presence is not necessary for practice, that the Dhamma remains, that liberation is still possible, that everything he needs has already been given. Word spread through the town that the Buddha was dying, and people came, monks and nuns, lay people, rulers and peasants, everyone wanting to pay respects, to see the Buddha one last time, to receive a final blessing. And the Buddha received them all, weak as he was, dying as he was, still teaching, still compassionate, still present for those who came. Among the visitors was a wanderer named Subhada, who had heard of the Buddha but never met him, who had questions, who wanted to understand. And Ananda tried to turn him away. The Buddha is too weak, too close to death. This is not the time. But the Buddha overheard and said, "Let him come, let him ask. For this will be the last person I convert, the last one to hear the Dhamma directly from the Tathagata." And so Subhada was admitted, asked his questions, heard the Buddha teach one final time, understood, achieved stream entry, became the Buddha's last personal disciple, the final being to be awakened through direct encounter with the living Buddha. Your eyelids growing heavy, your breathing so slow, so steady. Night fell. Darkness covered the grove. Stars appeared overhead, and the Buddha lay between the sal trees, surrounded by disciples, by faithful, by those who loved him, entering his final hours, preparing for the ultimate release. He asked the monks 3 times if anyone had any doubts, any questions, any confusion about the teaching. Speak now, ask now, for soon the teacher will be gone. Only the teaching will remain. But the monks remained silent, having no doubts, understanding clearly, ready to continue without him. The Buddha then spoke his final words, words that have echoed through centuries, words that encapsulate his teaching, words that remind us of the fundamental truth. Listen, monks. I tell you this: all conditioned things are subject to decay. All formations are impermanent. Strive on with diligence. Work out your liberation with earnestness. This is my final instruction. All conditioned things, everything that comes into being, everything that is born, constructed, formed, is subject to decay, to aging, to death, to dissolution. This is not pessimism, not negativity, but simple truth. The truth that sets us free when we truly understand it, when we truly accept it, when we stop fighting against it and learn to live in harmony with impermanence. And therefore, strive on with diligence. Don't waste time. Don't procrastinate. Don't assume you have forever. Practice now. Live ethically now. Develop wisdom now. For death comes to everyone. Time runs out for everyone. And the opportunity to practice, to awaken, to liberate ourselves, exists only in this present moment, only in this precious human life. Then the text tells us he descended back through the levels, returned to the fourth jhana, that state of perfect equanimity, of pure awareness beyond pleasure or pain, of consciousness balanced at the still point, and from that state, the Buddha passed away. The aggregates ceased. The body became empty of consciousness. The Buddha entered parinirvana, final complete nirvana, liberation beyond all conditions. The moment of passing was marked by an earthquake. The texts report the earth shaking, trembling, stars seeming to fall from the sky, celestial music filling the air. These signs, whether understood literally or as poetic expressions of the magnitude of this event, convey that all those gathered in the grove knew, felt, that something extraordinary had ended, that the world had changed, that a light had gone out, though the teaching remained, though the path continued. The monks who were not yet fully enlightened wept, crying out in grief. The Blessed One has passed away too soon. The eye of the world has closed. But those who had achieved awakening remained composed, mindful, understanding. Yes, the Buddha has passed, as all conditioned things must. This is the nature of existence. Impermanence is the characteristic of all formations. Let your jaw soften, your hands unclench. Nothing to hold on to here. For 7 days, the Buddha's body lay in state in Kushinagar, according to traditional accounts, covered in flowers, honored by many. And the Malla clan, the rulers of Kushinagar, prepared for the cremation with great ceremony, building a funeral pyre, gathering sandalwood and incense, preparing to give the Buddha's body to the flames, as was the custom. The texts tell us the pyre would not light, would not ignite despite efforts, for the great disciple Mahakashyapa had not yet arrived, was traveling from another region, and the pyre itself seemed to wait, to refuse to burn until this senior disciple could pay his respects, could see his teacher one final time. When Mahakashyapa finally arrived, the tradition says, he bowed 3 times with profound reverence, and immediately the pyre burst into flames, consuming the Buddha's body, completing the final return to the elements, the relics that remained, bone fragments, teeth, pieces that had not completely burned, were gathered carefully, reverently, and they became objects of veneration, sources of blessing, for they were all that remained of the Buddha's physical presence in the world. Initially, the Malla clan wanted to keep all the relics, to build a stupa, a memorial shrine, in Kushinagar alone. But other kingdoms, other groups who had been touched by the Buddha's teaching, sent representatives demanding their share. 7 kingdoms claimed the right to the relics, and war nearly broke out. Armies assembled, weapons prepared, over the remains of the one who had taught peace, who had preached non-violence, who had shown the way beyond hatred and greed. Your body is so relaxed now, floating, drifting, held by these ancient words. But a wise Brahmin named Drona intervened, spoke of the Buddha's teaching, reminded everyone of what the Buddha had stood for, of his message of peace and harmony, and suggested that the relics be divided equally, shared among all the claimants, so that each could build a stupa, could honor the Buddha in their own land, could maintain a physical reminder of his presence and teaching. This solution was accepted. The relics were divided into 8 portions, distributed to the 8 claimants, and stupas were built, great mounds of earth and stone, marking the sites, becoming pilgrimage destinations, places where the faithful could come to honor the Buddha, to remember his teaching, to renew their commitment to the path. 250 years later, the great Buddhist king Ashoka, who ruled most of India in the 3rd century BCE, according to later Buddhist chronicles, ordered these original stupas opened, the relics redistributed, and tradition says he built 84,000 stupas throughout his kingdom, spreading the Buddha's relics far and wide, creating. These stupas still exist, some of them marking the landscape of India and Nepal, physical reminders of the Buddha's presence, of his teaching, of the path he showed. And pilgrims still come, still walk the circuits, still bow and make offerings, still feel connected across 2,500 years to the awakened one who changed the world. The 4 major pilgrimage sites in the Buddha's life became established. Lumbini, where he was born; Bodh Gaya, where he achieved enlightenment; Sarnath, where he gave his first teaching; and Kushinagar, where he passed away. These 4 places, marking the arc of his life: birth, awakening, teaching, death, the journey we all take, but which he completed with full awareness, with perfect understanding, with complete liberation. Let your thoughts drift, your body rest. The wisdom will find its way in. After the Buddha's death, the Sangha gathered, convened the first Buddhist council, where Ananda, who had heard all the teachings, who had been present for countless discourses, recited from memory everything the Buddha had taught. Thus have I heard. He would begin, and then repeat word for word the teachings, the circumstances, the audience, the questions and answers, preserving the Dhamma for future generations. Upali, the former barber, recited the Vinaya, the monastic code, the rules and guidelines for community life, everything the Buddha had established for the Sangha's governance, for harmonious living, for supporting practice. 500 fully enlightened monks gathered for this council, verified the teachings, confirmed the authenticity, created the oral tradition that would eventually be written down, that would be translated into dozens of languages, that would spread across Asia and eventually around world, preserving the Buddha's words, his teaching, his path for all who would come after. The Sangha continued, grew, spread, adapted to new cultures, new languages, new circumstances. Different schools developed, different emphases, different practices. Theravada emphasizing individual liberation. Mahayana emphasizing universal compassion. Vajrayana adding tantric methods, each finding ways to transmit the essential teaching, each maintaining the core insight. Suffering exists. Suffering has a cause. Suffering can cease. There is a path to the cessation of suffering. Monks and none carried the teaching to Sri Lanka, to Burma, to Thailand, to Cambodia, to China, to Korea, to Japan, to Tibet, to Mongolia, translating texts, establishing monasteries, training disciples, adapting the presentation while preserving the essence. The Dhamma spreading like the ripples from that first teaching at Sarnath, reaching further and further, touching more and more beings, offering the path to liberation to anyone willing to practice. Your breathing is so slow, so steady, peaceful, calm. Kings and emperors became Buddhists, supported the Sangha, built temples and monasteries, sponsored the copying of texts, the creation of statues, the preservation of teachings. Ordinary people took refuge, practiced ethics, supported the monks and nuns, found peace and meaning in the Buddha's path. Scholars studied the teachings, wrote commentaries, clarified difficult points, debated interpretations, developed philosophical systems, while simple practitioners just meditated, just lived ethically, just tried to embody kindness and wisdom. Both approaches valid, both part of the tradition. For the Buddha had said, "Come and see. Test these teachings for yourself. Find what works, what leads to peace, to clarity, to freedom." The teaching survived invasions, the decline of Buddhism in India, the persecution of Buddhists in some eras and places, the destruction of monasteries, the burning of libraries. For the Dhamma was carried not in buildings or books, but in hearts and minds, in the living transmission from teacher to student, in the practice that produced results, in the liberation that proved the teaching true. And now, 2,500 years after the Buddha walked the dusty roads of northern India, after he sat beneath the Bodhi tree, after he taught in the deer park, after he passed away between the sail trees, his teaching has reached the whole world, has been translated into hundreds of languages, has touched billions of lives, has produced countless enlightened beings, has offered a path of peace and wisdom to all who seek it. The Buddha's life, from privileged prince to awakened teacher, from palace walls to homeless, wandering, from ignorance to enlightenment, from suffering to liberation. This life stands as a testament to human potential, to what is possible when we commit fully to awakening, when we question deeply, when we practice sincerely. His story teaches us that comfort and wealth are not enough, that even if we have everything the world considers valuable, if we lack understanding, if we don't confront the fundamental questions, if we avoid the reality of impermanence, we will remain unsatisfied, restless, searching for something we cannot name. It teaches us that the spiritual path requires courage, requires letting go, requires being willing to leave behind what is familiar, what is comfortable, what we think we need, in order to find what we truly need: true peace, true freedom, true awakening. It teaches us that extremes don't work, that neither indulgence nor denial leads to liberation, that the middle way, the path of balance, of wisdom, of working with reality as it is rather than fighting against it, this is what leads to freedom. Your eyelids so heavy now, your body completely at ease, at rest. The Buddha's core teaching remains as relevant today as it was 2,500 years ago. For human nature has not changed. We still experience suffering. We still age and sicken and die. We still crave what we don't have. We still cling to what we do have. We still create suffering for ourselves and others through ignorance, through greed, through hatred, through delusion. But the path out remains available. The Four Noble Truths still describe reality accurately. Suffering exists. It has a cause. It can cease. There is a way to make it cease. These truths are not beliefs, not dogma, but observations anyone can verify through their own experience, through their own practice. The Eightfold Path still works. Right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. These practices still transform consciousness, still lead to wisdom, still produce peace, still open the way to liberation. The Buddha never claimed to be a god, never said he was special by nature, never suggested that his awakening was something only he could achieve. Instead, he said, "I am awake, and you can wake up too. I have found the path, and you can walk it. I have crossed to the further shore, and you can cross it as well. Come and see. Test it yourself. Practice and discover. Let your breath deepen. Slow down. Release." This democratization of enlightenment, this insistence that liberation is available to anyone who practices, not just to priests or Brahmins, not just to men or to monastics, but to anyone, anywhere, of any background. This was revolutionary. This changed how people thought about spiritual development, about what was possible for ordinary human beings. The Buddha's teaching points us toward what we already have, toward our own awareness, our own consciousness. For awakening is not something foreign to be acquired, but our deepest nature to be uncovered, revealed, recognized. We are all potential Buddhas, all capable of awakening. The only question is whether we will practice, whether we will walk the path, whether we will commit to liberation. And the path begins where we are, right now, in this moment, with this breath, with this awareness. We don't need to be somewhere else. Don't need to be someone else. Don't need to wait for better conditions. The practice is available now. Mindfulness of breathing, mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of thoughts and emotions, observing impermanence, seeing suffering, understanding the cause, walking toward cessation. Every moment offers an opportunity to practice, to choose awareness over unconsciousness, to choose kindness over cruelty, to choose wisdom over ignorance, to choose letting go over clinging. These small choices, repeated. Your body is so relaxed now, so completely at ease, floating on these words. The Buddha's life reminds us that transformation is possible, that no matter where we start, no matter what our conditioning, no matter what patterns we've developed, change is possible. Awakening is possible. Liberation is possible. For consciousness is not fixed, is not solid, is not unchanging. It can be trained, developed, purified, liberated. Angulimala, the murderer, became a saint. Patakara, who lost her entire family, found peace. Ordinary people, flawed people, confused people, they all walked the path, they all practiced, and they all found freedom. Not because they were special, but because the path works, because the Dhamma is true, because liberation is the natural result of sincere practice. And the practice need not be dramatic, need not involve renouncing everything, leaving your family, sitting under a tree for weeks. For most of us, the path looks different, looks like being kinder to the person next to you, more patient with yourself, more aware of your thoughts, more mindful of your actions, more generous with your time and resources, more ethical in your speech and behavior. It looks like sitting for 10 minutes each morning, watching the breath, noticing when the mind wanders, gently bringing attention back again and again, building the capacity for awareness, for presence, for being here now, fully awake, fully alive. It looks like pausing before reacting, noticing anger arising, seeing it clearly, feeling it in the body, understanding it, letting it pass without acting on it, choosing a wiser response, a kinder response, a response that doesn't create more suffering. Let your jaw soften, your hands unclench. Nothing to hold on to here. It looks like studying the teachings, reading the suttas, contemplating impermanence, understanding dependent origination, seeing how suffering arises, how it can cease, integrating this understanding into daily life, into moment by moment experience. It looks like finding community, practicing with others, supporting each other on the path. For the Sangha is still here, still available. Not just the monastic Sangha, but the community of all practitioners, all seekers, all those walking toward awakening. We support each other, learn from each other, inspire each other, remind each other why we practice, what we're aiming for, what's possible. The Buddha's teaching is not about believing, but about practicing. Not about faith, but about verification. Not about accepting what someone else discovered, but about discovering it yourself, testing it, proving it, knowing it directly through your own experience. And this is why the teaching has endured, why it has spread, why it continues to attract sincere seekers. Because it works. Because people practice and their suffering decreases, their wisdom increases, their peace deepens, their compassion expands. The results speak for themselves. Validate the path. Confirm the truth of the teaching. Your breathing is so slow, so steady, peaceful, calm, as you drift toward sleep now, as consciousness begins to dissolve into rest, into the peace of letting go. Carry with you the essence of the Buddha's teaching, not as concepts to remember, but as truth to embody, as wisdom to live. Remember that all things are impermanent. Everything changes. Everything passes. This breath, this moment, this body, this life, knowing this deeply, accepting this fully, we can let go, can stop clinging, can find peace in the midst of constant change. Remember that suffering has a cause and therefore can cease. We are not victims of random fate, not powerless before suffering. We participate in creating our experience, and we can participate in liberating ourselves through understanding, through practice, through wise action and clear seeing. Remember that you are capable, that awakening is your birthright, your potential, your deepest nature, the Buddha within you, your own awareness, your own consciousness is the same awareness that became enlightened beneath the Bodhi tree. The same consciousness that penetrated to the root of suffering. The same awareness that achieved liberation. You already have everything you need. It's just a matter of uncovering it, recognizing it, living from it. Let your thoughts drift, your body rest. The wisdom will find its way in. The Buddha's final words echo across centuries. All conditioned things are impermanent. Strive on with diligence. Don't waste this precious life, this precious opportunity. Practice while you can. Awaken while there's time. For death comes to everyone. The body will fail. Consciousness will depart. And the question will be, did we wake up? Did we see clearly? Did we find freedom? Or did we sleep through this life, lost in distraction, caught in craving, bound by ignorance? But there's no need to create pressure, no need to strive anxiously, for the path is also about ease, about relaxation, about letting go rather than holding on, about allowing rather than forcing, about being rather than doing. The middle way applies here too, between complacency and anxiety, between laziness and strain. We practice with dedication, but also with gentleness, with patience, with compassion for ourselves and our process. And now, as sleep approaches, as consciousness prepares to let go into rest, into the temporary dissolution that mirrors the final dissolution, we can practice dying well, practice letting go, practice releasing control, releasing awareness, allowing the mind to dissolve into sleep, as one day it will dissolve into death. And in that letting go, in that surrender, finding peace, finding ease, finding the freedom that comes from not grasping, not clinging, not trying to hold on to what inevitably passes. Your eyelids are closing, your body sinking, your mind quieting. The Buddha's story is complete. From birth in Lumbini to death in Kushinagar, from prince to ascetic to awakened teacher, from suffering to understanding to liberation. His journey mirrors ours, shows us what's possible, illuminates the path we can walk, invites us to undertake our own journey, our own quest, our own awakening. The teaching remains, preserved in texts and traditions, but more importantly, alive in practice, in the experience of millions who have walked this path, who have found peace through mindfulness, wisdom through meditation, freedom through understanding. The Buddha's words are not ancient history. Not outdated philosophy, but living truth, relevant guidance, practical methods that work today as they worked 2,500 years ago. And so we honor the Buddha, not with flowers and incense, though these have their place, but with practice, with living the teaching, with embodying the Dhamma, with walking the path he showed, with dedicating ourselves to awakening, not just for ourselves, but for all beings, for everyone who suffers, everyone who seeks, everyone who longs for freedom, but doesn't know the way. May the Buddha's teaching continue. May the Dhamma endure. May the Sangha flourish. May all beings find peace. May all beings find wisdom. May all beings achieve liberation. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from suffering. Your body is completely at rest now. Your mind so quiet, so still. Sleep now. Drift now. Let go now. Into peace. Into rest. Into the temporary release that sleep brings, knowing that the teaching remains, that the path continues, that awakening awaits, not in some distant future, but here, now, in this very awareness, in this very consciousness that observes, that knows, that simply is. The Buddha's story has been told, his life remembered, his teaching honored, and now, as you sleep, as you rest, as consciousness dissolves into dreams and darkness, may you find peace. May you find ease. May you taste the freedom that comes from letting go, from releasing all grasping, all clinging, all attachment. Sleep well, rest deeply, and may your dreams be peaceful. May all beings everywhere be free from suffering. May all beings everywhere know peace. May all beings everywhere awaken. Good night. Soft silence. Fade to complete quiet.